Hello, love. Welcome back to my channel. If you're new, my name is Jennifer Laurel Keller, and I'm an artist and instructor, but what I really do is help people express themselves with creative confidence. Today I'm going to be working on this painting, and here we have a beautiful forest with the sunlight coming through the trees, casting gorgeous shadows down onto the trail. And then we have this beautiful fall foliage picking up the light, and then the sky comes through the canopy with these fun brush strokes. And I'll be adding a few little details at the end. I'm using this reference photo from a hike that I took in the Sierra foothills in California. So let's get into it. I had a canvas with an underpainting already, and it's an 11 by 14 canvas. I'm using golden fluid acrylics, and I'm using chromium oxide green, teal, quinacridone magenta, Payne's gray, yellow ochre, cadmium yellow medium hue, cadmium red medium hue, and titanium white. All right, so I have my reference image up in the corner for you to look at, and what I'm adding first is this greenish teal color up in the sky, and that color is really for the canopy. And then I come down with more yellow and a bit of purple down at the bottom for my shadow color. So I'm starting with colors that are more in shadow. And then I will bring in my tree trunks. So I'm looking at the reference image, and where the trunks end, the bottom of the trees, will determine where they sit in the distance, in the depth of the field of vision. So the trees that end higher up will be further away, and I try to vary the colors a little bit. There's lots of sun and warmth hitting the trees in certain areas, so I'm varying the warm tones and the light that's hitting my trees, and also making sure to paint the edges. So now I'm mixing up a sky color with teal, Payne's gray, and white, and I'm dappling in the sky in this sort of mosaic pattern in between the trunks, and painting the sides as well. So this is indicating the sky coming through the branches of the trees. Like I said in my last video, this is a lot like Morse code. Lots of dots and dashes sprinkled in. The horizontal lines in between are indicating the branches, and then I do leave some gaps of vertical lines as well, just hinting at a few little skinny trees way back in the distance. Next I have an orange, which I'm bringing in for a touch of fall colors, and those are overlapping the trunks, and I just look around and see where are there orange tones in the foreground as well. And now I'm bringing in more green and yellow and white mixed up into a nice light yellow green to bring in more light. So I'm just stepping up the warmth and the value of that underbrush, the distant low foliage that are in and between and behind those trees. And then also looking in the foreground to see where it happens in the forest. Next, I'm bringing in a pink, which I am using for the trail where the light is coming through the trees and hitting the ground. And I'm imagining where my sun is, and I'm looking at my reference image again and making sure that the shapes add up. Now I'm doing a bit of texture and light on my trees, just starting to work with that texture. And there's also texture on the ground. There's different light patterns that are coming through. And I decided now would be a good time to bring in the sun. So the sunlight is coming through the most right behind my focal point tree. And that is where the sun is, right behind that tree and then spreading out and diffusing throughout the sky. And then I mix up another blue, which is like the blue I had to begin with the sky, with more white in it. So it's starting to dissipate the further away it gets from the light source. And now is a good time for me to just step back and look at this painting from across the room. It's always good to take a break and get some perspective on your project. So while I look at this, I just want to remind you that it would be wonderful if you could like, comment, and subscribe to my channel. Every little bit helps, and if you want more content like this, definitely subscribe. Okay, so now I'm back and I'm going to pop in a few shadows. This is a green and blue together, the Payne's gray and green. And I'm just working in a few more details in the shadows of the forest floor. There are areas where the shadows come through that undergrowth, and there are darker plants on the ground. And I'm bringing that up into the canopy just a bit as well. And I have to remember to paint the sides. Okay, so now I'm bringing in that light green, that light yellow green a little bit, where the sun is peeking through and hitting plants that are in the foreground. And just doing some variation of some different greens. So I'm taking my green and I'm adding teal, or I'm adding Payne's gray, or I'm adding yellow, and just popping it through, sprinkling it around. Here is yellow and white together, making a nice sunlit color for my leaves. And there is a lot of light hitting the forest behind the trees, picking up that sunlight and making everything seem to glow. All right, so now I have some white on my brush with a little tiny bit of magenta, and I just want to bring more light and texture onto the forest floor, and a bit more variation in that texture on the bottom. All right, now I have some Payne's gray and magenta and white on my brush, and I'm working on the texture of the bark. So I'm mixing it up. Some are twisting, some are straight up and down, and just adding to the texture of this piece. All right, next I'm working in the faraway trees, just a little hint of those tree trunks out in the distance, and bringing the color, circulating the color around. I got some water on my brush and put in a few sprinkles, and if I act quick enough, I can dip my rag in the water and wipe away any that I don't want. Now for the sun, I'm just going to punch the sun up with a second layer, and it seems to bend around that tree trunk. So I came in a bit on that tree that the sun is hiding behind, and also bringing some white into the foreground just to bring that high highlight into the foreground as well, just a smidge. I thought the piece needed more pink, so I'm bringing in more pink in and around my fall foliage, as well as using it as a warm tone in some of the trunks, which adds that warmth as well. And I also want to break up the lines on my shadows just a tiny bit. All right, so now For the final little touches, I'm adding some warmth to the foreground, keeping an eye on my reference image. Here is a reminder of what that reference image looks like. And then we're going to look at the finished piece here. So we're all done. I have my finished piece, which I am calling Casting Light. And you can see how the sun is coming through that and kind of bending the light around that tree trunk where it is just hiding behind the tree. And we have a lot of light happening right there. And then the light is hitting the ground, coming through the trees onto the trail with the texture there, which leads the eye around the canvas. It's like an arrow pointing over here, seeing how the shadows hit the forest floor and then come up with all of that beautiful light, those yellows and oranges and pinks in the foliage as we travel up into the canopy and begin to notice all of the sky blue tones coming through the canopy with those easy little brush marks peppered in around the pine branches. Coming down again, we see a few details, a little happy tree in the distance, and then one lit in the foreground, little saplings growing in between these bigger trees. And then the shadows lead us back up into that sunlight. So if you like this piece, I have it available over on my website in my online shop. It's an 11 by 14 canvas. You can frame it if you like. It's a standard size, so you should be able to find a really nice ready-made frame for it. But if you don't want to frame it, you can also hang it as is and let the sides show. I also have lots of online classes on my website. I have over 25 Skillshare classes in painting and mixed media, and I have some free gifts over there about business practices and art fundamentals if you sign up for my newsletter. So I invite you to come on over to the website, check it out. And I had a bit of excess paint on my palette, so I decided to use that wet paint and work on a second painting, which was an abstract, just a fun, loose way to wrap up the day's session, which I will make another video about. So if you want to check that out, please remember to subscribe so you see that come out when it's ready. So that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed this. And remember, if you show up and practice with an open mind, you'll learn something new every time. So thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate it. Much love.